crowd is going wild as an underground cage match takes place. A dark-skinned lady walks into the premises and tells the bartender that she's looking for Carter Ford. The man points him out to be the one beating up his opponent in the fight. Carter knocks out his opponent to secure his 6th win in a row, and a man covered in a hoodie enters the cage to challenge him to his 7th fight. As soon as the hoodie comes off, murmurs go up in the crowd, and you could see the fear in Carter's eyes as he stared at his opponent. Despite his winning streak, Carter refuses to fight the guy. The crowd boos at him, but he doesn't care and tells them to keep their money. Carter gets pushed out of the cage as the challenger smiles and makes gestures at him. His opponent then wins the money without even moving a finger and heads out. As he leaves the premises, the fighter gets followed by someone who loses on a bet. Because of him, the loser stabs him with a knife, but he doesn't retaliate, and the guy leaves. The lady who was looking for Carter earlier approaches the stabbed fighter at his car and recognizes him as Dalton while complimenting his little trick of revealing himself to win money. She tells him about her Roadhouse that's out in Florida Keys. While he tends to his wound, she complains about some ruffians that come around, trashing the place while the police remain useless. Dalton turns down her offer to come work as a bouncer there, but she writes down her number for him just in case and introduces herself as Frankie. Dalton leaves, and it looks like the only roof over his head is the one his car provides. A cop tells him to move out of the front of a gas station, and he heads to a train track to finally end it all. When the train gets closer, he decides that maybe there's something worth living for, and the train barely misses him as it bashes the back of his car. This would have been one hell of a short movie if he remained there, but I guess the writers still had plans for him. Dalton takes Frankie's offer and heads out to the Florida Keys. He gets dropped off at his bus stop, which is in front of a bookstore and some other shops. A girl named Charlie, who runs the bookstore with her father, comes to talk to him and starts telling him about a tree named Fred. She hands him a book about Fred and asks what brings him to Glass Key. Dalton tells her that he came to work at the Roadhouse bar. Her father comes out of the store and introduces himself as Steven. He then tells Dalton where the Roadhouse is, and he heads there with his luggage. As he walks into the bar, the bartender, Laura, gives him a drink, while one of the waiters, Billy, recognizes who Dalton is. He comments on how peaceful the place is, and we see the irony of that comment as the scene switches to nighttime. Bar fights break out, and the live band just keeps playing like it's an everyday thing. Some bikers pull up to the bar and start causing more of a ruckus. Their leader, Dell, starts rough-handling one of the girls, and Billy tries to stop him, but Dalton steps in to save him. Dalton gets them to come outside after talking like he was going to mess with their bikes. While they're outside the bar, Dalton asks if they have medical insurance or if there's a hospital nearby before he deals with them. One of the bikers, named Mo, stupidly comments that there's a hospital 25 minutes away, and you can tell he's the black sheep of the group. Dalton beats them up before taking them to the hospital. At the hospital, Ellie, who's a doctor there, thanks him for bringing in some goons and comments on how he's just a guy that likes beating up people. She notices his bleeding wound and they go inside for her to patch him up. After that, she gives him some drugs and he goes back to the Roadhouse. On his way, some shady-looking guys inside a car are watching him. Back at Frankie's bar, she gives Dalton his weekly payout and tells him about a hotel in town where he could stay. He mentions he'll be staying on a houseboat that's up for sale, and she reveals it's actually hers, inherited along with the bar from her uncle. Frankie welcomes him to stay there and warns him about the crocodile that killed the dockmaster's dog. At the boat, he uncovers it while the dockmaster greets him. While he sleeps, he dreams of his last championship UFC fight, but his dreams are cut short when Laura wakes him up the next morning, who also brings breakfast for him. She tells about all the other bouncers that left, but hopes that things will be different now that he's there. Dalton heads to Charlie's bookstore and asks to use their computer while she talks about his life story that she read in a book. Some of those bikers start a commotion at a nearby store, and Charlie goes out with a bat to make them leave. The guys decide to leave only after Dalton arrives. That's when Charlie shares with him that her dad is working a second job because her mom has passed away. He goes to the Roadhouse and asks Frankie how everyone suddenly knows his name, but I guess you can't be anonymous as a championship fighter. Out in the middle of the ocean, the bikers meet their boss in his boat. The boss's name is Ben Brandt, but they call him Mr. B. They tell him what happened at the Roadhouse while he gets his beard shaved on the boat. The waves of the ocean cause the boat to sway too much, which leads to Ben getting injuries from the shaving blade. While he reprimands his guys, One of them suggests that Ben should call his father to help. Ben ignores him while he gets more injuries due to the unstable boat ride. He then heads to knock out the driver, who told him the boat ride would be smooth. Later, at the Roadhouse, tensions flare when a man disrupts the live band, unhappy with the music, sparking a fight. Dalton instructs Billy to deal with the troublemaker, especially since he's armed with a knife. As the situation escalates and Billy is nearly stabbed, Dalton steps in, breaking the troublemaker's fingers to neutralize the threat. Throughout the evening, Billy continues to manage any disturbances under Dalton's watchful guidance. Seeing the need for more help, Dalton recruits Reef, a former college boxer, to join their team. Together with Billy, they efficiently handle any troublemakers that show up. In one incident, Dalton personally deals with a man who had overindulged and attempted to steal more drinks. As he escorts him out, Dalton catches Dell and his gang watching from a distance before they slip away. After another night filled with restless dreams, Dalton decides he needs a breath of fresh air and a break from it all. So in the morning, he heads out to a nearby outdoor restaurant. That's where he runs into Ellie, who comes over to share some local wisdom about Glass Key's way of life, emphasizing the importance of family ties and loyalty and hinting at the less than helpful local police. Their conversation soon veers into a more lighthearted exchange, filled with flirtation and talk about conchs, before Ellie takes her leave. Back at the Roadhouse, Frankie shows Dalton a photo of her uncle who built the place and hands him his payment. On his walk home, Dalton narrowly escapes an attempt on his life. When Dell tries to run him over with a truck, Dalton dodges in time, but Dell loses control, crashing the truck into a bridge's side. The impact sends Dalton and the truck tumbling into the water. In a stunning turn of events, Dalton emerges from the ordeal alive, managing to escape from the submerged vehicle. Dalton heads back to his boat and finds Dell there waiting for him with a shotgun. They get into a fight, and Dalton knocks Dell into the water. A hungry crocodile comes along to turn Dell into a kiddie's meal, and Dalton isn't able to save him. The next day, the dockmaster tells him that they won't be able to find the body since crocodiles hide their food, and tells Dalton that he may have gotten in the way of Dell's business, which probably involved drugs. Dalton goes to the bookstore to use the computer and figure out the boat routes that would be needed to run deliveries. But Charlie tells him that deliveries won't work because of the reefs. As he leaves, one of Ben's goons stops him and tells Dalton that Ben wants to see him while threatening him with a gun. Dalton breaks the guy's fingers and asks him to tell his boss to come see him at his workplace. Dalton goes to see Frankie at the Roadhouse and asks her why those guys have been terrorizing her place for months. Frankie brushes off the question with a vague response, as if she's hiding something. Benz gets frustrated when his henchmen update him on the situation. It worsens when he gets a call from his dad. The scene shifts to some crazy guy who's escaping a building naked after, I guess, he was caught having an affair with the owner's wife. The naked guy's name is Knox, and he gets a call from Ben's dad, who tells him about his son messing things up. Knox steals a jacket from a vendor and leaves for Florida. Meanwhile, Ellie meets up with Dalton with a boat she took from her ex and takes the fighter out to the middle of the ocean for a date. She tells him how the Brandt family is one of the old families in Florida that built up Glass Keys. Dalton tries to leave after Ellie tries to get to know him, but she stops him, and they make out. Dalton gets picked up by some cops as Ellie drops him off, and they drive to meet the sheriff. He gets threatened by the sheriff to leave town and is nearly shot before Ellie comes to his rescue. On their way back, Ellie tells Dalton that the sheriff is her dad, who used to work for Ben's dad, Gerald Brandt, who's in prison, but now he works for the spoiled brat. Meanwhile, Knox has gotten to Ben's beach house and tells Ben that he was sent by his father to handle things. Later, some goons head to Ellie's bookstore to mess the place up. That night at the Roadhouse, Ben meets Dalton and tries to agitate him by showing him a clip of his last fight, where he beat up his opponent, whom Dalton also considered his friend. Ben leaves and goes outside to tell Knox to handle things. While Ben goes to his car, Frankie follows him up. Knox walks into the bar and deliberately starts trouble, interrupting the band and causing chaos. His actions ignite a full-on bar brawl, during which he directly challenges Dalton. The confrontation escalates, and Dalton ends up taking a serious beating before managing to leave the scene. In the aftermath, with the bar in shambles, police and ambulances arrive, and Frankie surveys the damage to her establishment. Stepping outside, Frankie finds Dalton packing, ready to leave town. It's then she reveals her deeper troubles. Ben is plotting to take over the Roadhouse to build a resort. Having already acquired most of the surrounding land, the Roadhouse is the last piece he needs. Dalton, feeling betrayed by the lack of transparency, tells her she should have hired someone else for the job before walking away. On his way to the bus stop, he sees that Ellie's bookstore has been burnt up, and she's now in the hospital with her dad. Dalton finally snaps and goes to Ben's beach house, where he kills one of the guys responsible for messing up Ellie's store. He takes the body out in a truck and meets Mo, who tells him that Ben will be having a meeting at Harvest Key by 5 in the morning. Dalton wakes from a haunting dream, vividly reliving a moment from his last match where he's overpowered and loses control, leading to the death of his opponent. This unsettling memory stirs him into action the next morning as he sets a trap for a deputy tasked with delivering a box of cash to Ben. Dalton's plan swiftly unfolds, and he cleverly frames the deputy for the murder he committed the night before. He then knocks out the cop and sends the boat speeding into the ocean with the box of money. Dalton heads back to his boat to prepare some explosives when the sheriff comes to tell him that Ellie's been kidnapped by Ben and he would release her in exchange for the money. Dalton steals a boat from Ellie's ex-boyfriend and heads out to the middle of the ocean to see Ben. When he gets there, he sees the sheriff who lied about Ellie being kidnapped, but Ben confesses that he did kidnap her. Dalton activates the explosive on his boat as he sees Knox approaching them and uses the confusion to beat up some guys and look for Ellie. He sees her trying to break out, but the water pressure eventually bursts the glass. Out in the ocean, he tells Ellie to get on a boat while Knox tries to run him over on the water. Dalton eventually gets on Knox's boat and knocks him into the water while he collides with Ellie's boat, which sends him flying over to her own. The two of them fight Ben and leave him as the boat speeds and crashes into the Roadhouse. Dalton and Ellie swim to land, and he goes to handle Ben, who nearly impales him with a harpoon. As he beats up the rich kid, Knox, who doesn't know what a driver's license is, crashes into the place with a truck. Dalton and Knox start fighting, and we see who the real UFC champion is. A full fight sequence breaks out, and Dalton puts Knox in a headlock. Knox breaks out of it and stabs Dalton with a piece of wood. Ben tells him to finish up the job, but Knox just snaps the rich kid's neck. Knox returns to finish up the job, but Dalton flips the tables and stabs him continuously until Knox passes out. With the fight over, Ellie and her dad walk into the place and tell Dalton that he must leave town. The sheriff says he'll cover for him as he leaves. Dalton goes to the bus stop and says goodbye to Ellie, and also tells her that he's not the hero in this story. Meanwhile, inside the store, Steven sees the box of cash that Dalton hid away, but as he rushes out to see him, the bus drives off. Following a rough fight scene with Dalton, Knox was nearly on the brink of death, but he miraculously ended up alive in the hospital. There's a scene after the credits where he fights off some hospital workers who try to prevent him from leaving. After overpowering them, Knox confidently walks out of the hospital like nothing happened. Are you thrilled by Dalton's wild ride? Smash that like button, hit subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned for more amazing recaps.